It was a rainy Friday afternoon in late April when I got the call. "Evelyn, Mr. Ellison would like to see you in his office." The receptionist's voice sounded unusually tense. After 29 years at Walden Industrial Group, I had never once been summoned to the executive floor without prior notice. Something wasn't right. As I walked into the room, I saw David Ellison, our new operations director, sitting back in his leather chair, a manila folder on his desk. He didn't even look up. "Evelyn," he said casually, "how long have you been with us?" 29 years and 362 days, I replied, my voice steady. My stomach tightened. 3 days, just 3 days from the date my pension would fully vest. I had counted down to that milestone for years. He slid the folder across the desk. "Due to restructuring and budget constraints, your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." I didn't speak right away. My heart was racing, but not from shock, not even from sadness. I had spent 3 decades working in corporate compliance. I knew when something wasn't right. And this was not random. I stood up slowly, picked up the unopened folder, and gave him a polite nod. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said. He looked surprised by my calmness, but I wasn't about to give him what he wanted. I wasn't going to break down, beg, or make a scene. I would walk out with dignity. Outside his office, Janet from HR was waiting with a forced smile and a cardboard box. I packed my things, a photo of my late husband, a small plant from my daughter, and the plaque I received for 25 years of service. I didn't take much. Most of what mattered couldn't fit in a box anyway. As the security guard held the door for me one last time, I nodded politely and stepped out into the cold rain. 3 days before my pension. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. Driving home through the damp streets of Chicago, I replayed the conversation in my mind. 3 days before my pension vested, after 29 years of loyal service. It wasn't coincidence. It was a calculated move, and I knew exactly who was behind it. David Ellison had joined Walden Industrial Group just 6 months earlier, fresh from a high-paying consulting job out west. From day one, his mission was clear: cut costs, tighten operations, boost short-term profits for shareholders. The board loved him. But people like me, we were obstacles. I had spent nearly 3 decades in compliance, reviewing contracts, analyzing regulatory risk, investigating discrepancies others brushed aside. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't political. But I was thorough. I followed the rules, and I expected others to do the same. When David rolled out a new efficiency initiative last quarter, something didn't sit right. It proposed slashing inspection protocols and modifying reporting methods that clearly flirted with legal boundaries. I refused to sign off on it. I warned the executive team on paper that some of the adjustments could constitute violations of federal safety standards. The memo disappeared into a black hole. No response, no meeting, just silence. From that moment, I felt the shift. My weekly reports were rerouted. Requests for clarification went unanswered. Meetings were rescheduled again and again. And then, just days before my pension was due to vest, I was let go with a smile and a manila folder. It hurt. Not just because of the money, not even because of the betrayal. What cut deepest was the realization that my loyalty, my sacrifice, my decades of quiet service, they had meant nothing to them. I thought about all the times I had stayed late to review contracts while my daughter waited for me to come home, the family vacations I had cut short because of last-minute audits, the Christmas when my husband was hospitalized and I still showed up to finalize quarterly reports. I had always believed that hard work and integrity would pay off in the end. But David didn't care about integrity. He cared about optics, numbers, and eliminating anything or anyone that got in the way of his metrics. Still, he had underestimated me. He thought I was another tired woman who would sign whatever document was handed to her and disappear quietly. But I wasn't finished, not even close. Back home, I placed the manila folder on my kitchen table and made myself a cup of tea. For a few minutes, I just sat there, listening to the rain tap against the window. Then, slowly, I opened the folder. It was all there. The standard severance package. 3 months' salary, no healthcare continuation, no access to legal counsel, and most crucially a clause waiving all rights to any future claims against the company. If I signed, I'd be forfeiting not only my pension but also the right to challenge the legality of my termination. I read the document twice. It was well-crafted, slick, precise, and intended to intimidate. A subtle weapon disguised as an opportunity. But I saw right through it. They weren't just firing me. They were silencing me. David and the legal team had likely assumed I'd panic, that I'd sign out of fear of losing income, fear of legal complexity, fear of being alone at my age in a competitive market, and if I had been anyone else, it might have worked. But what they didn't know was that I had seen this coming. For the past 4 years, I had been quietly collecting records. Copies of documents that didn't add up. Internal emails directing employees to adjust numbers for reporting purposes. Quality control logs mysteriously backdated after shipments were sent out. And memos, so many memos that I had sent to the upper ranks warning them of compliance breaches. I didn't collect those files because I expected to use them. I collected them because that's what a good compliance officer does. You don't look away when something seems off. You take note. You protect the company even if the company doesn't protect you. And now, as I looked at that severance agreement, it was clear they had made their move. It was time for me to make mine. I walked to my home office, a quiet room lined with bookshelves and family photographs. Tucked behind a row of albums sat a fireproof lockbox. I had placed it there years ago, not because I expected a day like this to come, but because my instincts told me to prepare, just in case. Inside were neatly organized folders, each labeled by quarter and year. I had spent the past 4 years collecting and copying internal documents that raised red flags. Nothing was stolen, nothing unethical, just duplicates of what I'd reviewed as part of my role. As a senior compliance officer, it was well within my rights to keep documentation for personal records and review. I flipped open the first binder. It began with an email chain from a former procurement manager, long since pushed out, raising concerns about falsified vendor invoices. I remembered how that conversation had quietly disappeared. Then came the falsified loan applications with signatures that didn't match. Reports filed to regulatory bodies with revenue numbers inflated by nearly 20%. Email threads where junior staff were instructed to adjust inventory logs to match desired quarterly results. But the most damning were the quality control records safety reports edited post-shipment. Certifications signed by people who were no longer with the company, and communications showing that David himself had ordered several backdated approvals to streamline process flow. Over 1,000 pages of evidence. Quietly gathered, meticulously labeled, and completely ignored when I'd brought them up the first time. I sat back in my chair and stared at the boxes. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every employee who trusted the company's books, every investor who relied on the numbers we published, every client who believed in our product quality. I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name, Gregory Hale. He had been our CFO for over a decade before leaving to work with the Securities and Exchange Commission. We had respected each other, even when we disagreed. Gregory was one of the few people I trusted in this industry. I took a breath, then tapped call. The phone rang twice before his familiar voice answered. "Evelyn, it's been a long time." I didn't waste a second. "Gregory, I think we need to talk. Something serious. And I have the documentation to prove it." He paused. "I'm listening." And just like that, the next chapter of this story began. That call with Gregory lasted nearly 2 hours. I sat at my desk, flipping through pages as I spoke, guiding him through the evidence I had collected, what it showed, when I'd flagged it, how the company had responded, or rather, how they hadn't. He listened intently, his tone shifting from concern to quiet urgency as I laid it all out. When I finished, he didn't hesitate. "Evelyn," he said, "this isn't just wrongful termination. Based on what you've described in the documents you have, Walden could be facing serious securities violations, possibly even criminal liability." He explained the process for filing a formal whistleblower complaint through the SEC. There would be confidentiality protections, legal safeguards, and if the case resulted in penalties or recovery, I could be eligible for a whistleblower award. But more importantly, he said, this was the right thing to do. "I've already spoken to our enforcement team," Gregory added. "They want to meet you first thing Monday morning. Don't sign anything, and secure those documents tonight." That night, I didn't sleep much, but not from fear. There was something else humming under my skin. Resolve. By morning, I had turned my kitchen into a war room. I made 3 complete sets of the documents, one for the SEC, one for my personal records, and one just in case anything went wrong. Each file was indexed, labeled, and backed up on an encrypted flash drive. Throughout the day, my phone rang nonstop. First Janet from HR, then David, then a call from the company's general counsel. "Evelyn," David said, "voice tight, we just need your signature to finalize the transition package. I can swing by if that's easier." I didn't answer. Then came a voicemail from legal, "Miss Carter, failure to sign by 5 p.m. Could jeopardize your severance entirely." At 4:30 my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. David stood on my porch, holding an envelope. I didn't open the door. I just watched. He slid the envelope into my mailbox and left without a word. I retrieved it minutes later. Inside was a second copy of the agreement. This one marked final opportunity with a handwritten deadline, Monday, 9 a.m. Too late, David. The moment I picked up the phone and called Gregory, the clock started ticking for you. Monday morning arrived with a calm clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed in my navy blue suit, the one I used to wear for major presentations, and placed the carefully organized documents into a secure leather briefcase. The federal building downtown stood quiet under a gray sky. Inside, glass walls and hushed voices created an atmosphere of quiet authority. Gregory met me in the lobby, his presence grounding. He looked older, grayer, but sharp as ever. "Evelyn," he said, shaking my hand warmly, "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Thank you for believing me," I replied. He led me into a conference room where two others were waiting, Angela Brennan, a senior enforcement attorney, and James Weston, a forensic accountant. Both greeted me with professional calm, but I could see the curiosity in their eyes. They were ready to listen. Angela started, "Mrs. Carter, I want to confirm that once we begin this interview, it becomes an official SEC investigation. Are you comfortable proceeding?" I nodded. "Yes, I understand completely." What followed was a 3-hour presentation of everything I had quietly observed and documented over the last 4 years. I walked them through falsified reports, financial inconsistencies, and internal memos that showed deliberate manipulation. I explained the shifts in documentation practices after David Ellison's arrival, the memos I sent that were ignored, and the pressure I received to remain silent. James flipped through the financial reports, frowning. "These discrepancies aren't minor. If what you've shown holds up, Walden has overstated revenues by at least 18% in the past 2 years. That's securities fraud." Angela looked at me. "And you brought these concerns to management multiple times?" "Yes," I replied, showing them the dated memos. "Before David joined, they'd at least acknowledge my concerns. But once he took over, everything got rerouted to his office. Nothing ever came back." Gregory leaned forward. "Do you believe your termination was directly related to your refusal to certify his cost-cutting initiative?" "Without question," I said. "The timing 3 days before my pension was no accident. He needed me out before I escalated the issue further." Angela closed her folder. "We'll begin our investigation immediately. You've provided substantial documentation. This may move quickly." I exhaled slowly, the weight of years finally beginning to lift. As I walked out of the building, my phone buzzed. It was Janet from HR. "Evelyn," she whispered, "something's happening. There's an emergency board meeting. David's locked in his office. Legal just got contacted by the SEC." So it had begun. And it was happening even faster than I imagined. By the time I returned home, my voicemail was full. There were messages from Janet, from the company's general counsel, and even from David himself, each one more urgent than the last. But I didn't return a single call. That afternoon, I received an official email from Walden's HR department. My termination had been placed on hold, and I was now on administrative leave with full benefits pending internal review. It was a transparent attempt to contain the fallout. Too little, far too late. Then, around 6 p.m., my phone rang again, this time from a number I recognized but hadn't expected. William Hargrove, chairman of the board. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice stiff and rehearsed, "we seem to have a situation that may benefit from your input. Would you be willing to come into the office tomorrow morning to discuss a resolution?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Hargrove," I said. "Any future discussions should involve my legal counsel and possibly representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm sure you understand." The silence on the line spoke volumes. After a pause, he cleared his throat. "I see. Perhaps we can arrange something more formal." "I think that would be best," I said, then ended the call. That night, I sat by the window and watched the city lights flicker beneath the clouds. I thought about the years I had spent trying to do things the right way by the book, without drama, without raising my voice. And I thought about how quickly the company I'd helped build had tried to erase me. But the erasure had failed, my silence had ended, and now everything they tried to bury was about to surface. The next morning, accompanied by my attorney, I would return not as an employee, but as a witness. Not to plead, not to argue, but to speak the truth, in full daylight, where no one could ignore it anymore. Tuesday morning, I arrived at Walden Industrial Group's headquarters with my attorney, Barbara Langston, no relation to David Ellison, though the irony wasn't lost on either of us. She was sharp, assertive, and exactly the kind of person you wanted beside you when walking into a room full of men who had underestimated you. The same security guard who had escorted me out just 4 days earlier now greeted me with a quiet nod and opened the door without a word. Inside, the tension was palpable. Employees glanced up from their desks, whispering behind hands. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as we walked by. The news about the SEC investigation had spread like wildfire. We were led to the main boardroom where William Hargrove sat at the head of the table, flanked by outside legal counsel and 3 visibly shaken board members. David Ellison was nowhere to be seen. "Miss Carter," William began, standing to shake my hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. We've initiated a full internal investigation based on the information you've brought forward." Barbara spoke before I could. "Let's be clear, Mr. Hargrove. My client didn't just bring these concerns forward now. She documented them and reported them for 4 years. The company's failure to act in its decision to terminate her 3 days before her pension vested speaks for itself." William shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, well, that's part of what we're investigating. I want to personally assure Ms. Carter that her termination has been rescinded. She is considered an employee in good standing, with full benefits including her pension." I looked directly at him. "And what about accountability?" He paused. "We're working to understand what went wrong." Barbara didn't let up. "What went wrong is that this company ignored a senior compliance officer who did her job with integrity, and when she refused to stay quiet, you tried to erase her. They offered me a consulting role post-retirement, a token position to save face. But I wasn't interested in saving theirs." As we stood to leave, William made one final plea. "Evelyn, we'd appreciate your cooperation with the SEC. Your support would help demonstrate that we're taking corrective action." I met his gaze calmly. For 29 years, I supported this company. I filed 47 reports, sent 16 memos, requested 9 meetings, only 2 of which ever happened. You had your chance. Now, I would cooperate with the facts, not with the narrative they wanted to write. By Wednesday morning, it was no longer just an internal matter. Local business journals splashed the headlines, "SEC investigates Walden Industrial for financial misconduct." The company's stock plunged. Analysts who had praised David Ellison's efficiency reforms just weeks earlier were now questioning the integrity of Walden's entire reporting structure. Emails from former colleagues flooded my inbox. Some were shocked. Others offered quiet congratulations. But many simply said, "I'm sorry, you deserved better." Later that afternoon, I received a formal letter from Walden's legal department. My termination was officially withdrawn. I was placed on administrative leave with full pay and full pension benefits. They hoped I would consider returning in a consulting capacity to help rebuild the company's compliance culture. But I wasn't looking for a title. I wasn't looking for revenge, either, not the way people often imagine it. This was never about retribution. It was about something quieter, harder, and more lasting: accountability, truth. The dignity of standing your ground when everyone else wants you to sit down. I didn't burn bridges. I just refused to let them collapse silently on top of me. To anyone listening, whether you're 20 or 60, whether you're being overlooked or outright erased, know this. You don't need to yell to be powerful. You don't need to break things to get justice. Sometimes all you need is a lockbox full of truth, a calm voice, and the courage to pick up the phone. If Evelyn's story moved you, share it. Let her quiet courage inspire someone who feels invisible today. Leave a comment. Hit like. Subscribe to The Art of Revenge, where strength speaks.